So bear that in mind. Bear that in mind.
Yeah. Cheers will be edited out.
Nice.
Okay, are we ready?
Yep, we're hot.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andy Skinner. With me are Emily Merriam and John Nelson. Welcome to those of you joining us online. I don't know how many of you are out there. The Pigeonhole app is available if you've got questions at the end, and we will try to get to one or two of them at least if we can. So we're here to talk about base maps, but not just base maps. We're going to look at ways of exploiting them and integrating them more into your presentation. And with John involved, we're probably going to have a bit of fun as well.
Oh, pressure's on.
Pressure's on, absolutely.
Oh,
you're not going to get away scot-free on this one. A little bit about me. I've been with Esri for 14 years now, but I'm actually in my 50th year as a cartographer. So I've come up from pen and ink to what we're doing now. I'm currently part of the base map authors team. So these are some of the base maps I've been responsible for. So you can say I represent the builders of the base maps. Emily and John are consummate users of the base maps. So we've got you covered pretty well all the way on this. Some basics to start off with. This is my definition of a base map, which is any map that provides a foundation and a geographic reference for your data. Now, it may be that that's part of the map that you're building and you don't need a separate item. Or it may be that you're building a base map yourself, and we encourage you to do that. That's one of the things we want to get out of this, is that you're thinking about building the base map yourself. Most likely, you're using one that we provide, at least as a starting point. But where does the base map end and your content begin? And that's the question we want to get into today. How do you exploit the base map to further the story that you're trying to tell? I'm going to start just by looking at some of the ones that we provide. And where can you find them? Well, ArcGIS Pro, then you probably know the base maps gallery in there, the drop-down menu at the top. These are most of what we call our core set of base maps. It might be that it's our standard gallery. Of course, it could be that you've got a custom one if you're part of an organization where they've put a custom one in there. If you're in ArcGIS Online, then when you choose the base maps option in the sidebar, then the base map gallery will come up then. Or you can find more in the Living Atlas, and there are more in the Living Atlas than you'll see in that gallery. You can get to the Living Atlas through Catalog and the portal, and there's a Living Atlas option which will allow you to search in there. In ArcGIS Online, you go to the Living Atlas option in Add Layer when you're in base maps, and then that'll give you the option to get in and search. Or you can go directly from the Living Atlas website. And then there are various custom pages available, both from us and from other users. This is a notable one, which is our Creative Base Maps page. You may not have seen this before. This is like a sort of sandpit for the base maps team, where when we come up with something, we'll put it in there, and it may not be part of our core set. It may make it to the core set eventually, but there are more in there, but you're still quite free to use them if you find one on there. And I'll be talking a bit more about those in a minute. So let's look at the ones that we have. I'm not going to go through these individually. We've got quite a few to go at. There is a logic to how we build them, though, and this is a term that John came up with a few years ago, and we've stuck with it because it's really good, which is the idea of base maps versus base maps. And a base map is one that is high content, strong colors, a good context for any information that you may put over the top of it, but the map may dominate what you're doing. So you need to be careful how you make a choice like that. A base map is one where the base is the important part. It's got subdued colors. It may even be grayscale, like the light gray canvas that we've got here. The trade-off is low content. So you've got to ask yourself, is there enough in the map to support what you're trying to do? And then in here, we've got light and dark, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And then we try and go the gamut between those two extremes so that hopefully there's something that is getting close to what you are really looking to use. Some variations around those same themes. OpenStreetMap appeared a couple of years ago. We've got a separate tile package which is built from the OpenStreetMap daylight data, which is a curated set of OpenStreetMap to take some of the worst extremes out there occasionally get in. There's the classic design in OpenStreetMap, and then we're adding more and more of our own sort of Esri Maps designs to that list. If you're WebMercator allergic, and you know who you are, then we do have maps in WGS84 as an option. Going beyond that has some issues, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. The places set is in beta at the moment. We've added a very intensive set of points of interest to some of our maps. They're in a subset of our maps at the moment while we sort of try them out and get your response to them. The chances are eventually they will find themselves into some more of our maps. We just haven't decided yet how widely to implement it. Enhanced contrast is an attempt to look at accessible mapping. There are two base maps that are there to be used with an accessible web experience. They're not accessible in themselves. It depends on how you use them as to whether you can say it's accessible. But they do work to the extent that it deals with it. They're WCAG Section 508 compliant, although neither of those say very much about maps, so that's not hard to do. But you know, they can be used in that sort of context. The community map is where you can add your content, either by arranging to supply us with your data or by going onto it. We have an editable community map where you can go in, a bit like you can on OpenStreetMap, and actually draw up the data, and it'll be included in our bases. And with your permission, it will eventually migrate through into our own Esri base maps. Local languages, this is a sort of two-part process. The local language is at large scales, and it's an option to change the language for most of the labels that are on the map, even the alphabet if that's appropriate. So that it's a simple command that's in there that will allow you to go from English through to the local language. Localization, it deals with small scales, and what happens there is that we've created separate versions of the maps in 40 different languages around the world. Generally, if you're in that part of the world and you access one of our base maps, then it will default to whatever that language is. But there is a way of getting to them now through the style editor, which I think you're going to mention, Emily. Then we've got our creative maps. As I said, this is where we get to have some fun too. We do them to please ourselves to some extent. We've got to have some fun as well. It's not just John. But also to try a few concepts out where we're doing that sort of thing. Because they're stylish, they look great, but they are going to dictate what your map looks like to a certain extent. So you've got to be prepared to let the rest of your map design follow this. Eventually, some of these will migrate through into our core set, and some of them are in there now. And then a special call out for imagery, which is the ultimate base map in some ways. It's difficult to work with though. There's such a variety of color in imagery that it's really difficult to try and find symbolization that'll work over the top of it in all context. Firefly addresses that to some extent because it's grayscale at smaller scales, and that makes life a lot easier. I've included vibrant in here. This is one of John's. It's not technically imagery, but the same sort of thing applies. There's so much color in the background that it's going to really challenge you to build over the top. Not that I'm saying don't use it, John. Okay, I said I was going to talk more about dark base maps and what's special about them. We're providing an increasing number of dark themed base maps. So when do they make sense? Well, sometimes it's a practical decision. It might be that you're working in a darkened environment, outside at night. In-car navigation is an obvious one, or in a darkened control room of some sort. And then cutting down on the glare from the map is actually quite important. And then a dark map actually has some importance. Excuse me. Sometimes it's just appropriate. The map may be part of a presentation or a web page. And if that's primarily dark, maybe the map's better to being dark as well. This is a dashboard built by Keith van Graffeland from our group, where that's certainly the case. He's used a dark dashboard, and so a dark map actually had some context with it. And then sometimes it just looks cool. This is a map of noise from transportation by Emily here, along with Michael Dangermond from our group. And I don't think I need to say anything else about this. Bright on dark, it just has a huge amount of impact. And, sometimes it's just a better way to go. There's a problem, though. You've got to be careful with quantitative maps. Because the question is, what is high and what is low? On this map, the higher values are the light values, because it makes sense on a dark map. But I'm guessing most of you looking at this would probably just assume that the dark values were the high values, because that's the way we've sort of been trained to think. So what you need to do is telegraph what's going on. So by that I mean drab versus bright is what I call this, which is what I've done here is put the high values in that really strong yellow to say this is important, this is what you need to focus on. And then the greens go away into almost grey, so they really fall into the background. Okay, on that point, let's start looking at how you can make changes to these base maps. And for that, I'm going to hand over to Emily.
Thank you. Let's see, we need to switch. Okay, thank you so much, Andy. Today, I would like to show you how to use the Vector Tile Style Editor. How many of you are using this tool? Okay,
All right.
great. Well, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how to use it, and I'm also going to talk about some of the enhancements that have been implemented lately. I'm super excited about this because there's some cool stuff. My name is Emily Merriam. I'm a senior GIS engineer with the Living Atlas Environment team. Here are 8 different maps that I customized the base map with the Vector Tile Style Editor. So for those of you who aren't aware of this tool, this is where you can customize many of Esri's base maps into whatever you want, whether it's a full redesign or just changing 1 or 2 features or colors on the map. Base map tiles, they're performant, they're scalable, they're updated constantly. I'll actually go into Pro and publish my layers to ArcGIS Online as vector tiles, and then I'll take them into the Vector Tile Style Editor, and you get a lot of options that you don't actually get in the map viewer. So I've been using it almost daily in my work. So we'll talk about some of those enhancements that I think are going to make your job a little bit easier. So where can you find it? There's no excuse why anybody shouldn't use it after today, because really it's all over. You can find it first in the Map Viewer Classic. Of course, we know this will be sunsetted eventually, but you can access the application directly from there by clicking on the Change Style icon. You can also do what I do. I just type it into a web browser search, and I'll search for Vector Tile Style Editor, and then it'll come up and I'll just access the application right there. You can also find it in the Living Atlas. It's a content item in Living Atlas, so you can search for style editor, something like that, and you'll be able to launch the application directly from the Living Atlas as well. It's also available in ArcGIS Online in your app picker. Your order of apps might be different, but you can also access the vector tile style editor directly from there. It's also available, and this is new enhancement from the actual tile layer content page. So you can just click on Edit in Vector Tile Style Editor and get to your styling directly from there. And lastly, you can access it directly from the developers page. So there's 6 places you can find this tool, so hopefully after today you'll all get to styling your base maps. So today, we're going to do a quick run through about making some general edits. Something I love doing is combining different base maps together and blending them together. And I'm not talking about the blend modes in the map viewer, which we will also use, but I'm taking different elements from base maps and putting them together to make a new base map. So we're going to walk through how to do that. As well, something super exciting, we can now edit the reference and label information in the base map. So this is basically like keys to the whole library now. So you can edit individual labels now. We're going to be working on 3 layers. Andy Skinner here, he developed the human geography base map. It's perfect, it's minimal, I use it all the time. But he's recently created a physical geography version that uses the beautiful human geography style. He made those edits in the vector tile style editor, and we're going to take his base map, latest base map, and make some further modifications to it so we can create a custom base map that uses imagery, but we're going to take the imagery down a little bit so we can really highlight different layers that you might want to put on top of it.
I won't be offended.
The imagery base map, as he said, there's a lot of areas that are dark and light, lots of visual information. We'll make a version here today that shows context, but also allows the data to be the main focus of the story. And then also, we're going to highlight the forested areas, as well as dig into those customized labels. So with that, let's go ahead and get to styling. All right, like I said, I've just typed in, vector tile style editor. I'm going to open up the application, sign in here. Uh-oh.
Yeah,
Where's IT?
you might have to come out of your PowerPoint session. Try that.
Close out of that. I don't know. Where'd he go?
This has happened to me before, yeah.
Switch over and switch back.
Here's something coming.
Anybody know any good
Hi.
jokes?
It's my computer. Yeah, thanks.
Could you unplug and replug back in?
I cannot. You want me to unplug?
Yeah, try that.
Okay.
The Restaurant on the Moon. No, I haven't heard that one.
I just transitioned out of PowerPoint and
There's a restaurant on the
Open
moon, but it
PowerPoint
has
back?
no atmosphere.
okay.
But it's also out of this world. Was that the follow-up? Wow. GIS people ready with a 1-2 punch. But sweet, sweet folks.
What projection does an EMT prefer?
An EMT?
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh, what projection does an ear, nose,
Okay,
throat doctor
but
prefer?
hold on, let me
Lay it
close
on
out
me.
of that. And then
Sinusoidal. I actually should have guessed that one. Shame on me. That was so bad.
Still not working.
It came up.
It
Yeah.
came up with your PowerPoint.
yeah, the PowerPoint works, but not the web browser.
Is it extended display?
We can switch the display. What should I put? Do you want me to put
Do mirror.
this one?
Duplicate.
Fixed it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay, here we are, we're back. So when you launch the application, I've styled lots of base maps, so you'll have a number of base maps that you've previously worked on, but we're going to go ahead and click New Style, and let's open up the topographic base map. This is the default base map that's in ArcGIS Online. This is going to be a quick lesson on how to use the tool. So we start here in the Quick Edit button. This is where you can make pretty quick changes to your map. Like if you wanted to change all the water features on your map, you just click here and you can go, it will change all of the water features. However, keep in mind that there's a cascading effect if you use these quick edit tools. It will change everything down all the way to the street level and variations of that color. So you don't have as much control here. I do some editing here. But generally, I do it more specifically by each layer. Next, we've got this new feature here. We can actually choose to switch the language of the entire base map. You can now click on another language. It will update the entire base map accordingly. We can also change the font of our entire base map here by just selecting one of the different fonts. Likewise, you can make the label sizes smaller or larger. Likewise for roads, narrower or wider. So pretty quick changes just to be made here in this screen. This is the Edit Layer Styles section, and you can actually really dig in to individual layers by just expanding them and opening up the style editor here, and you can customize the font, the color, the scale it comes in, halos, padding of your line, zoom, letter spacing. You get a lot of different tools here. Or you can just click on the map and the associated layer will just pop up like that. So pretty easy to use. This is the edit by color. Let's say you wanted to change all the colors on the map that participate with that color. You can easily just click on the color, all these different layers that also share that color, and just update the color easily from there. Next is edit icons and patterns. If you wanted to build your own custom icons or patterns, you can then upload those here and then integrate those into your map. This is the JSON editor. This is the actual code that's driving the base map. If you're comfortable working in the code, you can work here. We're going to be digging into this a little bit later, but all of the code details you'll find for these base maps is in the JSON editor. And lastly, we've got a Save As button here. Here on the bottom, we've got some choices. We can show a different base map in the background, like the hillshade or the imagery. And we've got these mini maps here that you can hide or show, depending on what you want to do. So let's get to styling here. We're going to start with this physical geography detail layer first. And I'm going to click on this Edit and Vector Tile Style Editor button. It's going to launch the application directly. So what we're going to do here is this is going to be our detail layer. All we want in this layer are going to be roads and rivers. So I'm actually going to go in and turn some stuff off. First thing I'm going to turn off is the airport polygons. We don't need these for this map, so I'm just going to click off like that. Let's get into the water. Let me zoom in a little bit. I want to change the color of these rivers on the map, so I'm going to just update the color here. A little bit lighter gray, like that. But we don't need the ocean layer on this map. We also don't need the bathymetry. And we also don't need the lakes. And because this is going to be a detail layer, this is just going to sit on top of our base map. I'm going to actually do some blending with the base layer in a moment. Let's zoom into San Francisco because I want to change the color of the roads. I want these to sit back a little bit more. And this is actually where I'm going to use the quick edit button and just take these down just a tad and just soften their impact on the map like that. All right, let's go ahead and save this. We'll just call this demo and save this one. And while this is saving, let's work on our base layer. So let's open this one in the style editor. All right, since I said earlier we're going to be working with imagery, I'm going to just switch this to imagery here. And I want the land, like I said, I want it to sit back a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some opacity here. I'm going to add 30% opacity, just so, let's get that. Well, let me get 30 here. And so now we still see the imagery, but it's just sitting back a little bit here. We are actually now going to adjust our water features. So I'm going to turn on the water because we're going to blend this later in our web map. And we're going to change the color of the water to like a pretty light blue.
Emily thinks in hexadecimal. This is impressive.
There we go. So it's a pretty light blue here. And if you recall from our assignment earlier, we want to accentuate these forested areas. Check this out. Let's go back to the topographic base map because we have vegetation in here that we can actually pull out of the topographic map and put it into another base map. So I'm going to come here. Let's just select it, open it up. And what's handy is if you edit the JSON and you've got a layer selected, it will just take you right there to that line of code. And so I'm going to take the vegetation layer out of this map. So let me just grab that to about here. I'm going to copy. And now let's bring it into this base map. So I'm going to click on the code editor here. And I'm just going to paste it in like that.
Oh,
and we'll update it.
goodness.
And now we have vegetation layer in our human or physical geography base layer. So now let's get to styling this. And now we've got this new section called vegetation. All right, let's go ahead and style this. Kind of a blue, pretty blue-green. Now, right now it's set up, the opacity actually gets less as you zoom in. I just want it to be blanket 15%, like persisting through the whole map. So I'm just going to drop this down to 15%, like that. Let's go ahead and style this layer. Go ahead and change this one.
She really does think in hex.
Yes.
Again, we're going to do 15%, like this. And now we've got the forested areas built into this human geography map. All right, let's go ahead and save this one. We'll just call this demo 2. We'll save. Now let's get to working on our reference layer.
That was sorcery. That was absolute sorcery that I just saw.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to switch to the hillshade because I need to know where I'm going. And let's go ahead and get right about here. So I'm going to make the font of this map, I'm just going to change it to be Arial, bold. I'm going to pump it up just a little bit. So the whole map now is in this Arial bold. But I'd actually like the hydro features to be more classic with a serif font. So I'm going to come into my edit layer styles. I'm going to click on water. And I'm going to make these with a serif font, more classic cartographic style. So we'll do the Noto serif bold italic. So now you see my hydro features are in this italic. My land features are in the Arial bold. So the next thing we're going to do is something that when I saw this demoed at one of our team meetings, it blew me away. I'm like, we can do anything now. We're going to change the label. I'd like this label for Tulare Lake Bed. I want this label to pop out a little bit more. And let me explain how we're going to do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take Tulare Lake Bed and we're going to hide it. Then we're going to copy the layer and then bring it back. So that's the process, but let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me grab my code here and I'll walk through this in a second. But I'm going to click on Tulare Lake Bed. I see that this is landform label round medium. Let's go into the edit JSON. And we're going to use this filter section here. So let me replace the code for what I'm going to do. And right now I'm saying I want you to label the label class. So we want the other labels for like Kettleman Hills to stay. But I want to exclude the name Tulare Lake Bed. And I do that with this exclamation point here. I'm saying I want to see all the other labels, but not Tulare Lake Bed. So I'm going to update this, and it's gone. Now what we need to do is go back into our edit layer styles, and I'm going to now duplicate this layer by coming up here to the duplicate layer. I'm going to duplicate it, and now you see we have this /1 here. So we have a duplicate copy of the same layer. Let's go back into our code. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I only want to see the Tulare Lake bed. I'm going to switch that exclamation point to an equal sign, and then we'll update. And now we've got it isolated, and I can come in here and I can make it bigger, more pronounced. Like that. All right, the next thing I want to show you, which is amazing, is I want Kings to say Kings County. I want it to have another word next to it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Kings. Let's go back into our edit JSON. And for this one, we're going to use this text field here, line 7,516. I'm going to add in the word county, like that. I'm going to update it, and now it says Kings County. I mean, this, like, how cool is that? All right, let's go ahead and save this. We'll just call this demo. Now let's build our map that we've done all of our styling. I'm going to come in here to this web map. All I've got in this web map is world hillshade and world imagery. First thing I'm going to do, I love to blend hillshade and imagery together. I like to put the hillshade on top of the imagery. So we're going to come in here, and we're just going to multiply this together and just boost it up a little bit. Let's zoom in so I could show you what I'm talking about. Here's without, and here's with. Just accentuates the terrain a little bit, more beautiful. Let's go ahead and make our imagery. We're going to drop this down to 50% because, like I said, we don't need it to be so present on the map. Let's go ahead and add in the 3 layers that we just created. We'll add in our reference layer. We're going to add in our base layer. And we're going to add in our detail layer, like that. All right, let's go back in and do some further modifications. So I could go in and make the topographic features that are in brown here. I could go back to the vector tile style editor. I could change the color there. Or I could just do a quick layer effect on it. And I'm just going to make these grayscale like that. And that just takes the color. Oops, wrong layer here. Where's our reference? Here it is. We're just going to put this to be in grayscale like that. I'm going to bring this into our reference section like that. I'm also going to drop the transparency down a little bit. I don't need the labels to be so strong, so I'm going to make these 30% transparent. Next, I'm going to take our base layer here, and I'm going to multiply this with the bottom 2 layers of hillshade and imagery, and just accentuate a little bit. And so now we've got this sort of hybrid map that's part digital and part reality. And we've basically combined world topographic, world imagery, world hillshade, as well as physical geography, base, detail, and reference layer all in one with just a few clicks.
So you can now all go home and just do that.
I did write a blog with some of the stuff I wrote here, or showed here, called Earth Art, so if you want more information, and then please feel free to reach out to me with any comments or questions. And with that, John, I will pass it to you.
That's a tough, good grief, I wish I had gone second. Thank you, Emily. But it is convenient because I'm going to do a lot of what Emily just showed, and I'm going to construct some base maps really quickly.
Can I just say while you're setting up, John, the highest vote online is for a comment which is, woohoo, it's John Nelson time.
Oh no. Oh no, look at...
I guess that means he needs no introduction.
Yeah. You know what's fun is my monitor is blank, so I'm going to be looking at the screen right now. So enjoy my profile. Base map jam fest. Let's just make a bunch of base maps, really. Let's take the wise and good and useful information that Emily just shared with us and twist it into something evil and bizarre. So I'll make this base map. I'm going to do 4 base maps. Oh, my screen is back. This one's called Porcelain, FYI. We're going to do another one called Georgian, which is like a map from the Georgian era. These are all created in ArcGIS Online. This one is Inferno. And here is Embossed. So these are 4 base maps that we're just going to dabble with. And don't feel like you have to remember everything, or even don't you dare take notes, because all of this information is available either in videos, which are linked here, or some Esri blog posts, which is also linked there. And I can't believe you guys fell for that. What are you seeing on your phones right now? I'm just kidding. Be careful the QR codes that you scan. Let's dig in. Okay, we go. I see somebody.
You've now got John Nelson in your life forever.
Yes. I'm in your cookies. Okay, so let's start out with porcelain. And specifically, if you want the QR code directly to the porcelain one, you can grab it and have it as a reference on your phone for later. And here we go. So I'm starting out with this world imagery base map, which in and of itself is a big basket of beautiful, good, gloriousness. And I'm going to add a layer from Living Atlas, the team that we all work on. And I'm going to look for hillshade. And I'm going to add the world hillshade tile layer, this one right here. And I'll add this to my map. And you'll see that it's just covering everything up. And I'm going to play with transparency a little bit, but that just muddies things. So instead of transparency, I'm going to use a blend mode like Emily did. And I'm going to choose luminosity. Luminosity is interesting because it keeps the texture of the hillshade and marries that with the hues of the underlying imagery. And we get this pseudo-cartographic thing that I think, I've said before, looks like it was sculpted out of sherbet. And I think it's just great. But it's a little washed out, right?
I can't tell you how many hours went into trying to do that manually in the old days.
That brings me such joy. So the ocean is a little bit washed out. Let's see what we can do about that. I'm going to open up this layer, and I'm going to go to the effects, and I'm just going to boost the brightness and contrast. I'm going to play around with this. Brightness I'll bring down so I can see stuff a little bit more. Contrast, I'm going to bring that down too until it looks pretty good. And now I've got a reasonably cartographic thing. On, off, on, off. Definitely experiment with these layer effects for your base map. And we've just got two standard layers right now, but we've created really an entirely new kind of base map here. Let's keep going. I'm going to add, once again from Living Atlas, the human geography content. Andy Skinner, Saint Andy, has created this, and it's effectively present in almost all of my maps that I make. I'm going to grab that human geography detail, and I'm going to add it to the reference layer, because I want that to render on top of everything. If I bring data into this, I want the roads and borders to sit on top of that. It's kind of like a magical, put me on top of everything zone. And I'm not thrilled with the gray in this case, so I'm going to turn on sepia and make it full on sepia. And then I'll take the hue rotate, and I'm just going to swing around the color wheel a little bit until it's the color that I like. And I'll get something that looks pleasantly oceany, sort of a watery, kind of a steelish blue. This looks pretty good to me. And there's so much you can do with these layer effects and stacking them on top of each other. So now we have an ocean layer. And I'm going to add a bloom, and what have I done? I've ruined it. No, it's okay. These are just sliders. I'm going to play with these sliders and see what looks good, because that's what I do. I wildly thrash sliders around until it looks a little bit better, and then I take the next step. So I'm going to turn these all the way down and just tweak strength up a little bit. And my goodness, now we've got something that looks a little bit like those nice coastal vignettes that are so hard to do, except I just did it by going click. It's so easy with effects, layer effects. And this is happening to that human geography detail layer.
This is why I do a lot of my base maps in grey, because I know people like John are going to butcher them afterwards anyway.
So sweet of you. Thank you. Let's continue the butchery. I'm adding human geography labels now. So I'm bringing in the text that Andy so meticulously crafted, and we're going to get weird. So look around. As I pan and zoom, we've got effectively a brand new style of base map. And here's an example. By the way, if you play with base maps in hillshade, the Pacific Northwest is a cheat code, and it'll always make your work look good. Here's another example. Look at this. Globally, this is what this base map looks like, porcelain. Zoomed in, it works at all zoom levels because it's just pulling in that data that exists from the tile layers. My home state of Michigan, beautiful Michigan. Central America. And you can find this already wrapped up as a base map, ready to go to add to your project. by searching for porcelain in the Living Atlas. Okay, next. We're going to move on to Georgian. I called it Georgian because it looks like those maps that were kind of lithographed in, who knows, what the early 1800s, the Georgian era. And that is
Even before me.
And there's a direct link to Georgian if you're curious. So, like Emily, I'm going to open up the vector tile style editor, and I am going to grab everything, pretty much everything that's not water. I'm going to grab water. And Emily showed you how to isolate something and paste it here. I'm just going to erase everything that's not maritime or river. So I'm going to keep only the bathymetry and the river. So I'm scrolling to the end of the water zone, and I'm grabbing that comma because I'm really good. Do you know what I'm really good at when it comes to markup? Breaking it. But this is a low-risk environment. I can always hit undo, and nothing has changed, and no data has been broken. So now I've got only water, and it's water all the way down, friends, in incredible detail. It's hard to get good water data, but not anymore, because I've just isolated it from the topographic base map. And I'm just going to save it. And I have saved this, and we've made it available to you in Living Atlas, and it's called Bathymetry Light. And it's a lot of fun and insanely useful. And I've also made a version of this called Bathymetry Dark, which is a lot like Bathymetry Light, only darker. Okay, so back to a map. Let me, I'm going to search for a different style of map. There is a map called Khaki. And once again, it's poor Andrew Skinner's human geography base map that I just turned khaki. And I called it Khaki, and I put it in Living Atlas. And it's like, hey, you guys, look, I made a new base map all by myself. I call it Khaki. And I'm adding that to my map. And now I'm adding in Bathymetry Dark. What the deuce is he doing? What is this? This is bizarre. I'm going to push the transparency way down, and I'll go into the effects and turn on hue, rotate, and swing this around until I get that nice kind of steely blue, like it's hand watercolored on those old maps. And I'll play with that bloom because I want a little bit of a vignette around the land, a little crisp edge from where the ink kind of piled up on the fibers of this old paper. And I want to punch up the brightness and contrast a little bit until it looks, suitably old and aged and weathered, like an old piece of paper that's been rolled up in George Washington's coat, or tied up like a cravat around his neck and taken to a party and shown off. Look, I have a Georgian-style map. What is he even talking about? I don't know anymore. So I'm going to add another layer, once again, from Living Atlas, which I love, and I'm going to search for the word paper. And I've made a bunch of paper textures available in Living Atlas so you can make your maps look less pixely and more papery. And I'm going to add a couple of them, parchment style and folded paper texture. These are all available. And I'm going to use a blend mode to kind of cook these tones into my map. I'm going to use a color burn to kind of nestle those wrinkles in and just make them dark. And now it looks like George Washington's cravat. What does that even mean? Cravats are like those fancy frilly ties around their neck. You can do that with a map, I suppose. So if I zoom into Barcelona and I look at these roads, they're so crisp and they're so perfect. Let's make them look less crisp and perfect because this is a map that's been, lithographed onto a piece of paper. So let's brew some chaos into this. I'm going to select that. I'm going to bring it up into my reference layers as I want to do because I want it to sit on top of everything. I'll make it fully opaque, and I'm going to give it a color burn. Now it's kind of nestled into the background, but I've lost it a little bit, and I want to darken it and make it a little bit fuzzy at the edges. So I'm just going to give that detail layer a drop shadow, and I'm going to give it just like a tannish drop shadow, so it looks like the ink is kind of bled to the edge, and you've got like this little artifact of a manual printing process. But look at this typography. It's so crisp and fresh and early 20th century, and it just doesn't fit. So I did go and I made, using the vector tile style editor, a version of the beautiful Andy Skinner human geography detail-based map in an old-timey font. I changed the font, I hit save, we put it in Living Atlas. It's available if you want your map to look old-fashioned. And I'm just going to push back that transparency and give it a color burn. And I'll give it a little bit of a blur because it worked with the roads, so maybe it'll work with the labels. I'll give it a little bit of a brown. And now we've got slightly old-fashioned looking map that looks, you know, conceivably like it was printed in 1790, except this one scales as you zoom in, and it has incredible precision and data across the entire world instead of just big open areas and dragons.
So I spent half my life drawing maps on paper, gratefully go digital, and now we're making it look like as if it's been drawn on paper.
Round and round we go, Andy. What's old is new again. Here are a few other examples of this style from different parts of the world, and you can find it in Living Atlas. It's called Georgian. Inferno. Who's ready for Inferno? This came about because somebody asked me about a Halloween base map that they were working on, and I thought, Halloween base map, it's got to be fun, it's got to be spooky, it's got to scare the kids, and let's see what we can do with this. So in Vector Tile Style Editor, I took, good grief, Andy, thank you, you're a saint. I took his human geography base map, and I just made them random candy corn colors. Candy corn. And it looked like this, and I did it for all three layers, the base, the detail, and the text. And I gave the text that weird kind of spooky, this font looks like it came right from the upside down, if you know what I'm talking about. And let's proceed to add these layers to my base map. So I'm going to search for the word Halloween, which is what I named them. Add it, add it, add it. Now I've got my three layers here, and I can just obliterate the original layer that was there. And I'm going to drag these into my reference layers so they render on top, as we like to do. And I'm going to add content from Living Atlas, if you can believe it. And I'm going to search for Hillshade. And there's a layer called World Hillshade that I'm adding here, and it's grayscale. And I'm going to push back its opacity, so 65% transparent, and I'll give it a blend mode of overlay. And this kind of uses the texture of the hillshade to add contrast. And I'm just going to invert it. Inverted hillshade looks spooky, you guys. There's a weird emotional aspect of inverted hillshade. It's like when you're telling ghost stories by the campfire and you put the flashlight under your face. That's what it does for hillshade. So invert your hillshade if you want a spooky map. It's weird. And I've given it a sepia effect. So for the detail layer, I'm going to push it back, and I'm going to give it a blend mode. It's all blend modes and effects all the way down, folks. Overlay to darken the oceans, and I'm going to give it a bloom because it looks cool, and I'm going to play with these sliders wildly and irresponsibly until I get something that looks like the edges of the sea are kind of a little bit scorched in some odd way, and I'm going to play with the brightness. I want this to be a little bit darker and higher contrast. And if I do this, then we can start to see the edges of the land sort of crispify, almost like I've burnt my marshmallow. And moving on, let's do these labels. Check this out. One fell swoop. It's like I've lit the candle inside the jack-o'-lantern for my labels. I've got these evil, glowing labels all over my Halloween-themed base map. And it looks like this. Once again, it's ready for any sort of Halloween event all over the world at any scale. You can find this on Living Atlas. It's called Inferno. Okay, I have one last base map style to show you. This one's, I was going to say more practical, but I don't know if it's any more practical. It's called embossed, and it makes it look like the land is elevated off of the ocean. Why? Because it looks cool. And when it comes to cartography, coolness counts. That's okay. And maybe there's a use case for this. It really highlights the water. So I've got a world imagery base map, and I'm just going to go bananas with the brightness and the contrast because I want the oceans to really pop and be very bright and crispy and blue and shimmering and downright tropical. I don't care how blown out the land is at this point. I'm going to get to that in a minute. So I'm going to add from Living Atlas good old imagery once more. I've just added the same layer a second time. This is what it originally looked like. And then I'm going to add another layer, bathymetry light, our old friend. And I'm going to group bathymetry light. And then inside that group, I'm going to add my world imagery underneath bathymetry light. What is he doing? And I'm going to select bathymetry light, and I'm going to give it a clipping blend mode. So I've opened the blend modes. I'm going to scroll all the way down and choose destination out. And that's like a cookie cutter. Now I'm only seeing the regular land, and I've hidden my my regular oceans, and now I'm seeing the bright oceans underneath. And now it's just a matter of selecting that group and giving it a gratuitous drop shadow with a big offset, which looks like this. And just thinking about how light works, I want to add a raised edge of light that would hit those. So I'm going to hit the bathymetry light and give this a light drop shadow with less of a width and less of an offset. And that looks like this. And so now we've just given a little bit of a light catching the raised edge of our imagery surface. It's kind of like I cut it out in construction paper and I've elevated it on top, which is a little bit fun, a little bit bizarre. And if you've got a practical application for this sort of thing, believe me, I would love to hear it because I can't think of any. I just like it. Here are some examples of before and after, right? Before and after. Before, Crater Lake. After. Before, this is the Portland area, I think. After. Before, after. Just makes it pop a little bit. It sings. It makes the sea sing. Central America before, after. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
The votes on that, who is John Nelson time, is up to 14 now online.
Yeah, who is he? And what is he doing in a professional environment? Get him out of here.
So I mentioned earlier that most of our maps are in Web Mercator, and it's become a sort of de facto industry standard, partly thanks to Google and the rest. And they used it because it's seamless and because the important parts of their work is at large scale. And so, you know, it suits them. We were sort of locked into having to use it for much of our online mapping, but it's not compulsory. Here's the problem, for those of you that haven't addressed it already. It makes sense at some large scales where it's less noticeable. As I said, I know that some of you may have very specific requirements that require particular projections, and I don't want to sort of minimize that. But from a visual point of view, at large scale, you can get away with it. But it's really irritating at small scale where those gross distortions come in towards the poles. Now in Pro, you can reproject. Labels will reorient. It looks fine. All of our base maps work well on that. Online, no, not at the moment. There's no way of reprojecting our maps online. And it's not practical for us to try and build it because we'd have to do separate tile packages for each projection, and there's a limit to what we can actually handle. So we've got WGS84. We're not going to go much beyond that. However, this is a version of the human geography base map that I built. Human geography, are you ready for this?
I love it when Andy says, however.
That I built from scratch in ArcGIS Pro. And I used Esri data and maps for it, just because it was there and I could. And it needed a little bit of massaging on the data, but I was able to get to it. But it was built at small scales only. And the reason for that, taking it into large scales would add significantly to the size of the vector tile package. The tile package for this was around 120 megabytes. Our full all-world, all-scale tile packages at the moment are running at around something around 60 or 70 gigabytes each. So it makes a big difference when you're only in small scale. So this is what I built in Pro. I didn't complete the styling here because I could do that later online using the ubiquitous style editor. So I was looking to get my layer construction right on here. Once I'd done that, it was a simple matter to go to web layer, share, set it to vector tile, and then in configuration, set the scale range and publish. When it comes up online, it'll appear as a vector tile package, and the tile layer comes up automatically quite often, but if it doesn't, then it's not a big deal. It's not hard to get in and create it. I could then take that into the style editor, finish off my styles to get back to what we have there. It didn't have to stop there. I was going to demonstrate the maps, but we're getting a bit short on time, so it didn't have to stop there. If I went back to my Pro package, To create another projection, all I did was copy and paste those layers into a new map in my project, reset the projection, and share a new vector tile package. And doing that, I was very quickly able to build 4 new projections, and you can add as many more as you like if you follow this workflow. I've got a blog out there which talks about this in more detail. That's it. We'll put up some URLs at the end. But that's pretty well how you can handle other projections. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Very quickly, what's next for us? We're going to continue updating our base maps and imagery. We've got a series of beta styles out there at the moment. I talked about places. Outdoor is beta at the moment. I know a lot of people are using it. You may not realize it's beta. These guys have talked about, Emily, you used vector hillshade, I think, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And the contours. Beautiful in being able to use the style editor to get really subtle shadings on the hillshade is great. And then Jack mentioned 3D base maps. They're only available through the scene viewer at the moment, but we've got 2 or 3 maps in there now that work in 3D, and we're going to be adding more to those. We will keep working on new features in the style editor, and it's a given that we'll keep creating new styles because we want to have some fun as well. Okay, that concludes the presentation. Some additional presentations coming up, and one of these is, well, a few of these are John. One of them, I think if you sit tight, did you say you're in here afterwards, John?
Oh yeah, that's coming right up next in this room.
And with that, we can start taking questions. I have got some, very quickly, if we can't get to questions, visit the Living Atlas Showcase area afterwards, and Emily's going to be there for part of the time. Our base maps manager, Andy Green, will be there, and they should be able to answer any detailed questions that you've got. We'll go into questions now, but I will keep each of these slides up for about 20 seconds if you want to take some camera shots. Questions online. Let me just have a look down quickly. Will there ever be official Esri versions of base maps without labels or the option to turn on or off labels? Well, we've demonstrated today a way that you can actually turn on and off labels. We're hoping that eventually in the style editor we'll get a single tool which says switch labels off. We haven't got it just yet. But yeah, I would recommend that you get in and play with it a little bit. There's another one, why Esri base maps don't show a country border between Ukraine and Russia. All I can say, I don't know the answer to that. All I can say is that we will be following a policy. I'm not sure whose policy it is, but if you check with Andy Green down at the booth, then he could tell you exactly what well, obviously if you're online you can't do that, but if you email in, then we can follow up on that and try and give you an answer on that. Okay, open to questions from the audience.
How do you know the imagery date that imagery-based maps are using?
The question is, how do we know the date of the imagery used in the base map? And it's a combination because there's a lot of different sources feathered in at all different scales. There is, I believe, a metadata layer for the World Imagery Base Map available in Living Atlas. So if you were to do a search for World Imagery metadata, I think you can find it. Alternatively, you can use the app called Wayback. So World Imagery Wayback is a dedicated app that you look at historic releases of that, and you can choose the most current version and click anywhere on the map and see the provider and the date of capture and the date that it was added to our base map. World Imagery Wayback. Welcome. We've proactively answered any question that you could possibly have. Oh, yeah.
What's the future of pen and paper for map?
From my point of view, thankfully, there is no future for me. I'm quite happy to put those days behind me. You tell me. I mean, there are people, if you've seen some of the work Sarah Bell's doing, she's just enjoying going back and working in pen and paper. So, there are people that are still working on it. From my point of view, no, I'm glad those days are behind me. We have got Mike Ridland in the audience from our Community Maps team. Mike, can you give an answer on that question about Crimea? Is that anything you're relevant?
No.
Okay. Sorry to put you on the spot. Email in if you want to know more about what our policy is on that.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great week. Have a great week.